千里之行，始于足下. A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we delve deeply into the Daodejing by Lao Tzu. We're going to continue our discussion of 51, not just line by line like last time, but also with additional examples and illustrations. And as you guys probably recall, we've also been talking about the chapter titles. So I'm noticing that chapter titles are usually not included as part of translations, commercially available translations out there. People tend to skip that. But then when I take a closer look at the chapter titles, I see that sometimes they can shed extra illumination on the meaning associated. They are at least a good statement on what the chapter is supposedly about. Now, just as the text of the Daodejing has multiple variations, different versions, slight changes between them, I find the same to be true for the chapter titles. This one, though, seems to be rather uniform. So most ancient texts identify this chapter as the chapter for respect and value. Respect as in respecting the Tao. That's the first character there, 尊. And then value, to value the virtue, the inherent power in all things. And that's the second chapter, that second character, pardon me, 贵. And then the last chapter there is simply, the last character there is simply the character for chapter. So together, it is the chapter of respect and value. And specifically, it's about relationship and connection between the myriad things and the Tao and virtue. So let's delve deeper into that relationship, keeping in mind, of course, that we human beings are included in the category of the myriad things. We're part of the myriad things. And we will also see the other way, how the Tao and virtue connect or relate to myriad things, including human beings. And what I mentioned last time was that when I talk about relationships in the Tao, it's all about the way that one regards something. It is, it's not so much the Western concept of developing a personal relationship with a deity. And those of you who have been studying the Tao for some time, you know that it makes sense because the Tao is not a deity. The study of the Tao is not a religion. So then, let's take a quick look at the chapter. Here's how the entire chapter looks like as we start with it, 18 lines. And then as usual, last time, we scanned through the ancient characters, looking for repeating patterns indicating a poetic structure. And of course, we found quite a few. And even with this slide, without anything extra added to it, without any emphasis, without any highlighting, I think your eyes, as you scan through the characters there in the middle column, I think your eyes will naturally pick out some characters that repeat. In this case, they're fairly obvious. But let's go ahead and turn on the highlighting and get back to where we were at. So what we did was that we divided up the chapter into two major sections, the first half and the second half, and altogether 4 subsections, in that each major half can be subdivided into a quarter each. Then the easily spotted repeating characters from 1 to 4, as you can see there, line 1 to line 4, easily identify those 4 lines as belonging to a subsection. So then from 5 to 9 would be the commentary in regards to the first 4 lines. Then from 10 to 14, we start out with a reiteration of the same theme as the first half. And then finally, at the bottom, we will conclude with a discussion about the characteristics of this concept called mystic virtue. So mystic virtue is an important concept that we're building up to line by line. So every section that we talk about, every commentary is going to bear upon that. So we got to line 6 previously. Now, line 6 is coming in at a good time in terms of our discussion because of the importance of the first section. The first 4 lines, Tao produces them, virtue raises them, things shape them, forces perfect them. These 4 lines describe the overall life pattern of existence. So, question number 1, them. Who's them? The last character of each line is referring to them, 知 translated as them. So who are they? Well, in line 5 that we were able to get to last time, it is stated explicitly that we're talking about the myriad things of the world, including us. And I say including us because, of course, we're also living things. We human beings are living things. We're all part of this world, not apart from it. And definitely the ancient sages have noted that when talking about the myriad things, people tended to exclude themselves and think about myriad things as just, the animals and plants. But in reality, we too are animals. So then these 4 lines, what do they mean? From our discussion last time, everything that we talked about can be summed up in one table that was also presented previously. So let's use that table as a quick recap. So on the left-hand side, the leftmost column is listing the 4 lines, the first 4 lines, plus the translation just below that. Then the column in the middle is how those lines apply to the myriad things, all living things. And then specifically, the rightmost column is about how the 4 lines apply to human beings. So we're going to continue to do this back and forth as we go through the entire chapter. These lines can be applied generally, across the spectrum. But then, because this is the study of the Tao, we always want to end with how these lines apply to us and apply to us individually. So step 1, myriad things. Step 2, human beings. Step 3, you yourself, me, myself, and I, everybody individually. So in this case, in this table, what we talked about before was that when we speak of the Tao producing them as in the myriad things, we're talking about the Tao as the source of life, the source of universal creation. And you'll hear that term again and again later on in our discussions. At the very end, we tie everything back together. It's about the universal creation. So the Tao is the ultimate source of universal creation. It is synonymous with, as well as the source of the natural laws, whatever that is. Now, of course, we don't really know. The grand mystery is that the heart of the Tao is ineffable. It's not something that we can put into words, at least not very easily. We don't know the true nature of the source. The ancient sages did not pretend to know everything. But there's enough that we can figure out, that we can understand, and then apply to our lives. So from the perspective of human beings, we would also say that we come from the Tao. From a physical perspective, we can say that our bodies are made up of molecules that eventually, when you trace all the molecules far back in time, as far as you can go, everything in us has an origin in the ultimate source, whatever that source is. And later on, I'll make the point, I'll reiterate the points that you can look at it from both a scientific and a religious perspective. When we talk about source, remember the Tao is just a label. If you are oriented to science, then you can substitute your own label. Perhaps for you, the label is the Big Bang. If you are more oriented to religion, perhaps a better label that you want to use for yourself would be Genesis. Either way, these are labels, they're interchangeable. The only thing that the ancient sages wanted to be sure of is to have something to talk about without getting into religious discussions. And therefore, that is the reason why we'll talk about the nature of the Tao being not necessarily deity-oriented or religion-oriented. So we do say that we come from the Tao and eventually return to it. I myself have more of a spiritual view, so I would say that this thing you call your true self, the you, the unique you-ness that makes up what you are, beyond your body, beyond your name, beyond your identity, your mind, your memories, the you, ineffable you, comes from the Tao. If you like, you can substitute my label with something like soul or something like consciousness. Either way, as long as we're recognizing that we're talking about the same, approximately the same area of discussion, that will be good enough for me. So then we also talked about virtue raises them. So if the Tao is the ultimate source, the source of life, whatever that source is, then De, the inherent power in all things, is the life force that powers or drives all living things. And virtue raises them differently. The life force causes divergent, unique development in the many different life forms out there, the many different living things. And when you apply that to human beings, you quickly see that, well, first of all, we're animals too, so we also have this life force that we're using. It animates us, it allows us to move about, to think, to reason, to take actions in the material world. And virtue raises us this life force causing us to grow and develop into different entities, each unique in terms of personality, in terms of our physical and mental makeup. So this applies to human beings in a very obvious way. So that's the top two. Those are important. And then the bottom two, equally important, but in a different way. We have things shape them. This is all about the different entities in the environment. For the myriad things, it's about the organisms that are within the same ecosphere, having interconnected influence upon one another. For human beings, it would be the many different roles that we play for one another, helping, guiding, assisting, supporting, and let's not forget the other side. Sometimes there's clashing, conflicting, battling one another. We can't forget about that. That's something that also exists. Either way, whether our interactions are positive or negative, we take on those various roles, we influence and help one another. So then, lastly, we have forces perfect them. So this is distinct from the entities within the environment. These are the forces that exist in the environment that are not necessarily associated with the entities in the same environment. So for the myriad of things, it's all about environmental factors. It's all about the temperature, the conditions, the weather. They all exert influence on living things. We human beings take it to the next level. Once again, it's not just the environment, it's also what we do with it. It's also about the political landscape, the economical landscape, our interactions, the changes that are coming, the development of technology, our understanding of the natural world. There's a lot. There's more that we have to deal with. And so when we talk about these forces that influence myriad things, including us, the example that we used previously was about this tree, the bent tree that was forced to grow this way because of strong winds. It's exposed to strong, persistent wind, causing it to grow at an angle. And as I mentioned last time, the same kind of tree, not too far from this one, maybe further downhill, shielded from the elements, can grow straight and tall, not at an angle. So this is a perfect metaphor for what happens when we ourselves grow as human beings and we ourselves are subjected to environmental conditions, environmental factors. And I want everyone to also pay attention to one thing. Notice that this slide applies to us in this group. It applies to this moment in time, right now. Our meeting, our talk every Sunday is a factor influencing our lives, or at least I hope it's a factor. We ourselves are the previous line were the different entities who play a role in one another's lives, big or small, and hopefully in a positive direction. We help one another understand the Tao. We discuss, we study together, and hopefully the Tao itself plays a role in our lives as well. And hopefully it is something that improves everything, every aspect of life for all of us. And in fact, when we talk about these four things, the Tao, the virtue, the entities in the environment, the forces in the environment, we can look at this whole idea using a diagram that makes everything very clear, very easy to grasp. So let me present that to you. First, we start out with lines 1 and 2. Tao produces them. Virtue raises them. So there's a few things that we can talk about here. Right off the bat, we see Tao. We see the character for Tao as the very first character in the first line of Daodejing chapter 51. And this character here in red, of course, you can probably see that it's just a smaller version of this bigger character here at the upper right-hand corner. That's the character for the Tao. So then we can use that, we can put that into a box like this. So the Tao, as we talked about, it is the ultimate source, the source of universal creation. Again, whatever that is. We don't pretend to know everything there is to know about it. We're just saying, all we're saying is that there's some kind of source. Whatever that is, we'll call it the Tao. And everyone can be free to call it whatever they want. Then, the other factor, the first character of the second line, De, remember, we are discussing the Daodejing right now. The last character, Jing, means a classic, a book that's hailed as a classic. Tao is what we just talked about, the Tao. De is virtue, and that's the second element. So let's go ahead and bring it into this graphical representation. We have the Tao on the one hand, we have virtue on the other hand, and virtue in this case is inherent power. There are many other utilizations of the same character, De, in the Daodejing, where De is representing virtue in terms of a human goodness. Like, for instance, compassion is a virtue. Here, we're talking about by virtue of. So the same English word, virtue, acts just like the Chinese character, De, in having that double layer meaning. Here, we're just going to focus on the inherent power for now, for the time being. So both line 1 and line 2 contain references to them. So we'll bring that in as well in a box. So one wu, meaning myriad things, including us. So there's relationship and connection between these three boxes. First of all, in line 1, you can easily see that the Tao produces or gives rise to, gives birth to myriad things, one wu. So that's easy to see. And what about the other connection? What about De? Well, De raises and grows myriad things because it is the inherent power in all living things to live, to grow, to develop, to mature. So as you can see in this diagram, it makes it quite easy to recognize that the Tao is the source of life, and virtue means a life force and a living thing that makes it grow. Is there more? Yes, of course. We've got line 3 and line 4. So let me put the highlight on them. I'm shifting the highlight from lines 1 and 2 to lines 3 and 4. So we can talk about things and forces. And as I mentioned, things are the entities in an environment. For us, it'll just be other people, people who play a role in our lives. So now to depict this, I want to use the entire slide for that. So let's shift gears and continue the graphical representation. First thing we'll do is to move the connections, the boxes that we have already done to sort of the upper part of the slide. Then we want to bring in a couple of additional boxes, starting with things, other entities, other people, other living things. And then the other box, the forces, as in the environmental factors. So now you can see that right in the center, 万物, the myriad things, have a specific kind of relationship with the Tao and virtue. Then, as 万物, the myriad things, including us, as we grow and develop, we are subjected to the influence of, first of all, other things, other entities. So that's this relationship right here. Other entities shape and influence us. And not only are we influenced by, and in turn we influence other people, we're also subjected to forces in the environment. And like I said, the changing world, the change that's coming as a result of maybe demographic shifts, maybe technology improvements. So environmental factors definitely play a role. Specifically, Lao Tzu says these forces, compel us to adapt. Like we need to adapt to change that's coming. And when you apply this to the myriad things, it's like a statement about evolution. Evolutionary forces compel change in a species in order to adapt and survive. So there's, of course, even more to this diagram than we have sketched out so far. But for now, though, you can see we've got 万物, the myriad things at the very center. We have the 4 boxes representing conceptual relationships affecting it. There's more, and we started to touch on the additional connections last time. Let's revisit what we talked about. So line 5 says, therefore the myriad things. Line 6 says, all respect the Tao and value virtue. So you can tell that we want to depict that as well in the graphic. But let's review quickly what we talked about previously, and that is the myriad things respect the Tao. And we're using a double negative here. Lao Tzu is using a double negative to say all living things respect the Tao, which is the source of life. And then all living things value virtue, which, as you have seen in the previous diagram, is all about the life force that's in all living things. So this just means that living things value their own lives. And last time, we also talked about the following. The Chinese Tao cultivators have abbreviated this concept into a set phrase, 成语, consisting of 4 characters. And this is what I showed you previously. So compressing them, you've got 尊道贵德, 4 characters. The first character means respect. Second character means the Tao. Third character means value. And the last character is virtues. Respect the Tao and value virtues. So notice that I added and. So this is one of the cases when you can add something without altering the original meaning. The original meaning is intended to be expressed as a combination of the 2 aspects, the Tao and virtue. And likewise, when we say 尊道贵德, we have 2 possible layers of meaning. Number 1 is this is the way that we should regard the Tao and virtue with the utmost respect, with the highest value. Okay, then the other layer of meaning is about how, remember, we and the Tao are one. Each individual inhabits, embodies the Tao to various extents. Thus, an individual's worth isn't really about how much money they have, how much power they possess. The true worth of the individual is about the extent to which they align with the Tao and practice virtues. So is there a way to incorporate this into our diagram? Indeed, the answer is yes, and the following slide is how it would look. We're back to the slide again with 万物 in the middle with the 4 elements affecting it in this diagram. So then 万物 have a regard for the Tao. 万物 naturally respect the source of life, and that respect can take many different forms. I'll explain in just a moment. And then what about 万物 in regards to virtues? Well, what Lao Tzu says is that 万物, the myriad things, hold virtues as the highest value. So when we apply this to the world, we've got 2 sides. We have 万物 respecting the source of life, and this may mean, for instance, respecting one's parents. This is also the flip side, which is the love and the nurture that parents have for the children. These are all manifestations of the respect for life, the natural, unforced respect. But talk more about that in just a minute. On the right-hand side, we've got 贵德, value one's own life. 德, the inherent life force in all living things, is held as a great value to that living thing. So when I study this, a lot of times I talk about how, culturally we value life. We set a great value upon life itself, and we want to protect life. Saving lives is important. And then sometimes I think about how, well, we're sort of biased and partisan because we are alive. So of course we would think about, being alive as a great value. And that's just another way to express what Lao Tzu is trying to say. All living things naturally value the lives that they have. You don't have to force them to value that life. They just are. So to illustrate that, here's another way. And what I said just a moment ago was that it's very important for us to apply these ideas to myriad things, to human beings, and then finally to you and me. So I'm going to use a table for that. So in this table, I've got on the left-hand side, valuing the virtue, that's 贵德, as it applies to myriad things and human beings. And then at the bottom there, respecting the Tao, 尊道, as it applies to myriad things and human beings. So let's break it down one category at a time. For myriad things, think about just animals for the moment. So for animals, the myriad things, all the living things have this survival instinct for self-preservation. It's about protecting oneself. So that's how much living things value the life that's in them. Strong survival instincts kick in a moment of danger. So they will either fight or they will flee. Of course, we've seen that. We can easily see that. Fear is a powerful driving factor in the animal kingdom. Animals act accordingly, according to instincts, according to fears, and it's all about self-preservation. So that's valuing the virtue. What about respecting the Tao? In this case, the Tao meaning the source of life. Well, myriad things. Again, think about animals. There's parenting instincts to nurture the young. Of course, we see this all the time as well. We don't even have to look very far. Look at this. We have adorable golden retrievers, mother, and her puppy. You don't have to force the mother to care and nurture her puppy. It's just natural. It's in accordance with the nature of the mom in this picture. Now, how would we extend this to apply to human beings? We're part of the myriad things, and yet we have more complexities in our lives. So for instance, when it talks about valuing the virtue, meaning the life that's in everybody, of course, we also have survival instincts. We also want to protect ourselves. We have that strong, powerful instinct for self-preservation. Of course, that goes without saying. We're animals too, so we partake in that. But we human beings, with human intelligence, the human mind, we are capable of pushing it another level. So when we go beyond just the animalistic self-preservation, human beings can reason and protect not just oneself, but protect what matters. Therefore, this brings in the possibility that we human beings are perfectly capable of sacrificing the individual self for the sake of others. So for instance, perhaps for children, the parents who sacrifice themselves for their children. Do we see that? Of course we do. Is that common? Yes, it is very common to see parents who sacrifice themselves for their children, their future generations. So we human beings take it to another level is what I'm trying to say. And what about respecting the Tao? Respecting the source of life? You know, the care and feeding of the young, like animals, we do that as well. But we extend beyond that. We form family units. We have mutual love and support, not just one way, not just from parents to kids, but also the other way as well. This is especially a big deal in the ancient Chinese culture that has always stressed the family unit and the love, the mutual love and support within it. It is a great sign of virtue when children are able to respond to the love from the parents and be grateful, express gratitude for that, and have the ability to reciprocate. So just as the parents care for the young when they are helpless infants and children, in the same way, when the kids grow up, develop into adulthood, that they would also care for the old. So you see this as a very big deal in all Asian societies, so much so that they have a specific character for that. Xiao. So this is the character that's usually translated as filial piety. And the feeling, I gotta tell you this, as a native speaker for both, the feeling of xiao and the feeling of filial piety are pretty far apart. and that's because of the cultural emphasis. A better way to express 孝 would not be this phrase, filial piety, which feels kind of distant, but it would be, quote unquote, being good to your parents or caring for your parents. That's 孝. So again, you can see the pattern here. We human beings take something that's pre-existing in the animal world, we take part in it as well, and then we extend and expand beyond the original parameters. So that's the idea. Now, let's continue on with our discussion. We're gonna blaze some new ground, a new trail, and then get into more concepts. So first, we'll continue this discussion about respecting the Tao, valuing virtues. Lao Tzu says that, well, this is not due to command. We're not ordered to, for instance, value the life that's in us. Nobody has to order you to have survival instincts. Respect and value are unforced. Nobody has to force you to do it. It flows naturally. And the reason for that is because, well, respect, value, they're built into living things. Living things that want to multiply and be fruitful must respect the Tao of life. And the Tao of life, in this case, means every stage of biological reproduction. That proliferation. So, living things give birth and naturally care for the newborn. They don't need a command to be that way. Living things that want to continue living must value their lives, act on their survival instincts, fight if necessary. And again, nobody has to force them to do that. Nobody has to order them to be that way. It's not that you have to comply to some kind of requirement. You just are that way on your own, by yourself, without being told. So this is the main point before we head into the next major concept. This slide, you can peek into what we're going to talk about next, which is going to be line 9. So there's the two characters there that are very important. 自然. We're going to get into those when we come back from the break. We are now going to get into line 9, which is in regards to constant nature. This expression, constant nature. Constant nature is really the key. And it's the key because for all living things, including humans, it would, of course, be unnatural to disregard life. It is natural for us to respect and value the basics of life, and by that, I'm talking about birth and growth. It will be strange for living things to be any other way. So, mother instinct, father instinct, powerful drives for human beings, without a doubt. And of course, children start out with a natural respect for parents, which we know among humans can go in many different directions as the children grow. And think about how this can apply not just to the parent-children dynamic, but to so many different aspects of life. Think about, for instance, how this applies to founders of an institution, inventors and their inventions, entrepreneurs, their startups, and so on. We might say that the invention is a brainchild. It's like children, and the inventor is like a parental figure. So this can be applied to multiple levels. You come from your parents, you respect them, like all living things, you value the life that's in you. Founders of a business are given their proper respect because without them, there would be no company. Whatever trade secrets they put into the companies they found, they are greatly valued. So now I want to focus on the last two characters here. 自然, translated as nature. So the last two characters of line 9, 自然, the two characters translated as the English word nature. They have special importance in the Tao, and that's why I want to highlight the two characters and then explain how they are used in a Tao context. 自然, so that is both the title of the slide as well as the heading of the bullet points. First, let me share with you the pinyin pronunciation. So you might say Ziran. Okay, close enough. 自然 is how it actually sounds to a native speaker. And we're going to be talking about the specific meaning of these two characters separately and together. So what follows the pinyin pronunciation is the literal transcription of the two characters. 自, the first character means self. 然, the second character means yes. A positive affirmation. Now, this is, let me point out that using 然 as yes is much more common in ancient times. No one who speaks modern Mandarin today would answer 然 to a question. It's not used in the modern vernacular for a Mandarin speaker. In ancient times, however, you could answer a question with 然 to say yes. So it is a positive affirmation of that. It's being in accordance with or in agreement with something. So I want you to keep these two characters in mind. We're going to be able to apply the understanding everywhere. So the overall meaning is nature, natural, naturally. But then let's take a look at the Daodejing to see where in the Daodejing does it appear. Where can we find the two characters? So first, 自然 appeared in Daodejing chapter 17. And this is in the context of natural accomplishment. Let me show you what that looks like. Line 8 and line 9 from chapter 17 of the Daodejing, it's talking about, this is a chapter about leadership. And in the highest form of leadership, people are not even aware of the actions of leadership. So when they accomplish something great, something that benefits everybody, people all say, we did it naturally. And there you see 自然 appearing. Now, you can plug the meaning from the second bullet here back into here. And now you can see what the people are saying. When they say, we did it naturally, what they're really saying is that we did it, the accomplishment, by being in accordance with ourselves. That is, how we are as a people, what we want as a group, what we have the ability to do. Okay? So these are the attributes associated with the self in question. To be in accordance with that is the yes part. It's the positive affirmation. Hopefully everybody followed the logic of what I just expressed. It's a deeper level of understanding than just the translation. There's more. If that's not the best example, that's okay. Here's another one. So in Daodejing, chapter 23, the term is about the natural cadence of heavenly phenomena. And here's how chapter 23 begins. It says, spirit speech is natural. Thus, strong wind does not last all morning. Then chapter 23 goes on to say that the rain that's falling down, it's not going to do that forever. It doesn't do that. It's going to come for a while. It's going to be raining for a while, and then it's going to stop. That's why I say natural cadence. There's a beginning, there's a start, there's a stop, there's a duration associated with the natural phenomenon. It means, again, I want you to plug it back in, plug the character specific definitions back in. It says the weather is always being true to the characteristic of heaven itself. And hopefully you picked out what I just said. The weather being true, that's the yes part, that's the positive affirmation. The characteristic of heaven itself, that's the self part. And one more, let's do another one. In chapter 25 of the Daodejing, it's about the Tao following the laws of nature. And here's what it says. Line 22, which is the very last line of that chapter, Tao follows the laws of nature. Right before that, it says heaven follows the laws of Tao. And then as the concluding line, Tao follows the laws of nature. So again, you can plug it in. You can say that the meaning here, the deeper meaning, is that the Tao is always true to itself. It is eternal and constant in that regard. It never changes. And hopefully you heard what I said just now and you're able to pick out the two parts. The Tao being true is the yes affirmation. To itself is the self part. Hence, 自然. So how would that bear upon the chapter we're studying now, chapter 51? Well, here it goes. Here's where we tie everything together. In this chapter, Daodejing 51, the term is used to describe the natural reverence that myriad things have for the Tao and virtue. So just like for the other chapters, I'll bring up the two lines as a snippet extracted from this chapter, where it says, not due to command, but to constant nature, that the myriad things are naturally respectful and naturally regarding virtue to be of great value. So that's what that is. They are affirming or in alignment with the characteristics of their essential selves. And there you have, once again, the yes part and the self part. In the characters, the self part comes first, 自, and then the yes part comes second, 然. So very easily we can say that, well, look, the myriad things, the living things are just being true to their own essence. And let's also be sure to apply this idea to us, we human beings, because as I said, we're part of the myriad things. So then, 自然 apply to you and me. will be about going with your own nature. Let me pull that up as a bullet. At the human level, being natural means being in accordance with yourself. So this means there's no need to put up a facade, no need to pretend, no need to live up to an image of how you think other people see you, how you think the role that you need to play in society. In the context of this chapter, what we're saying is that when the myriad things go with their own nature, their Tao, which means the way they are, then they naturally respect the Tao, meaning the source of life, and value virtue, which is the life force. There's no need to force any of it. So that unforced way is the way of 自然. When you have 自然in this context, a couple of things happen. It is how you can, number one, relax and be truly comfortable. You're just yourself. No need to pretend. No need to be who you are not. There's strain involved with that. That's number one. Number two, you can be at your best effortlessly. You know, I know we all hear this a lot. Just be yourself. It's so trite. It's such a cliche. It's a platitude. And yet, there's a kernel of truth. If you are able to relax, be comfortable, and be yourself, that is the best way to bring out your very best. So now, I have an image here to illustrate 自然. Let me show it to you. Here's what it looks like. 自然. And let me explain why I picked this image specifically. If we didn't have this discussion, if we didn't have the discussion that I had just now, I talk about 自然, you see that it's nature. You look at this picture, you may think, oh, yeah, this picture depicts nature in the grass and the trees. And there's what looks like a mountain or hill in the distance. Well, okay, that's nature, but that's not what we're talking about when it comes to 自然 that's applied to human beings. Hopefully, you see where I'm headed with this. If you can guess what 自然 is in this picture, please feel free to simply type it out. 自然, what I'm showing here, would be the feet kicked up as this person is relaxing in nature. 自然 is really not what's in front of the eyes of this person, but in the heart of this person. Hopefully, everyone can follow what I mean. It's being yourself, being able to relax, follow whatever is your true nature, be in accordance with that, and therefore enjoy this effortless time, perhaps in commune with nature. And one can further make the point, by the way, that when we talk about a setting like this, it's not nature. What I mean by that is that it's a lawn that's manicured. It's actually a man-made artifact to have a lawn like that. Okay? It's not something that naturally occurs in nature. In nature, you know, the grass will be grown in profusion without the occasional lawnmower that comes through to keep everything nice and trim there would not be the planting of trees, and these trees might have been planted, in a very specific artificial way. So the seeing is actually not nature in that perspective, but the ease and the comfort in the heart of the person who kicks his feet up, that is 自然. So hopefully you can now see the distinction. We're going to continue on. More concepts to cover from 51. And we'll talk about line 10 and line 11 together for a very specific reason. Line 10, thus, Tao produces them, virtue raises them. Except for thus, everything else about line 10 and line 11 are exactly the same as line 1 and line 2. It's a repetition of the first two lines and the repeater for emphasis. And so first of all, we'll quickly talk about the meaning, and then I'll show you the repetition. For all living things, including humans, it would be unnatural to disregard life. We're very biased because we are living things. So of course we want life. So the mother instinct, father instinct, powerful drives for human beings, without a doubt. Children start out with natural respect for the parents, as we mentioned, and consider how this applies to the founders of an institution. Now, let's take a look at the repetition. So with this highlighting, specific highlighting that you see here, you can tell line 10, line 11 are almost identical to line 1 and line 2. The difference is in one character, the first character of line 10, and it's the character for thus. So it's almost exact as a repetition, and repetition in classical ancient Chinese is always used for emphasis. And the remark that I made last time is still true, and that is, there was, in the ancient Chinese writing, there's no bold, there's no italics, there's no underlined text, there's not even punctuation. There were no capital letters either. It's a language that's not based on alphabet. So in order to emphasize something, your best bet is to repeat it a few times, usually twice. So let's get back to the lines under discussion. So here, we're going to move beyond the extent of discussion in lines 1 and 2 and go deeper into it. So now, what are we talking about? We're going off of line 11, virtue raises them, and then continue on with that. And then line 12 grows them, educates them. So let's take a look here. What is it saying? You have to sort of take line 11 into account. It's saying, by virtue of being alive, myriad things grow and learn. So that seems like a very obvious statement. And by virtue of being alive, the virtue is 德 in line 11. Myriad things, them, those are myriad things, grow, and that's in the first part of line 12 here. Educate, well, they learn. Who educates them? Well, the environment itself is the educator, the teacher. And we have to apply this to us as well. We know that animals will learn by experience, living in an environment. They have to learn how to, find food. They have to learn how to survive. They gain experience in the material world. Now, let's apply this to you and me, human beings. So the meaning is the same for us. This is similar to the expression, well, live and learn. As we live, we also learn. Hopefully, as we live, we also learn and not repeat our own mistakes and not repeat the mistakes that we have seen other people make. So the expression that we use here is the school of hard knocks. Do you know that school? I'm a graduate of that school, the school of hard knocks. This is because we take it to the next level beyond what animals can do using human intelligence. We use the mind. For us, the challenge is not just physical as it would be for myriad things, but also mental. Mental in terms of mental challenges, and both physical and mental aspects are part of the curriculum in the School of Hard Knocks. So I'm a graduate of that, and I'm willing to bet so are you. The School of Hard Knocks is the alma mater for all of us. We're all alumni of the School of Hard Knocks. So that's what this line means. So it's about finding the means of survival. For animals, it may be to find a food source. For us, it may be employment, meaningful work, stuff like that. And also what not to do, what to avoid, avoiding danger, etc. So in terms of the physical aspects, we know that the body responds to, just as an example, responds to frequent exercise, regular exercise, by becoming stronger, faster, and more capable. So whether you have an exercise routine or due to circumstance, you have to exercise, i.e. walk to a certain location on a daily basis, either way, the body responds. The body becomes healthier. It's the same for the mind. Mental challenges, the mind is sharpened by new information, new ideas, new concepts. They exercise the mind. So then, in a way, our meeting together on Sunday is an exercise for the mind. What I hope to do is to present you with new concepts for you. And when I say new concepts, I mean just, to us individually, these concepts have been around for centuries, thousands of years. But to understand them beyond what is typically understood in Western society, I think there's a lot of value in that. Let's continue on. The next bit is going to be about line 13. And as you can see here, sneak preview, line 13 says, perfects them, matures them. Let's go to that. So first of all, let's discuss the meaning. Perfection, what is that? What does that mean? It means the material world, quote unquote, perfects myriad things by completing their development. Because you are in this environment where you have to learn how to survive, where you have to figure out the best way to avoid danger, that is a learning experience, a development experience. So whether it's for animals or human beings, it's basically childhood to adulthood, a maturing process. So this is all about growing up, isn't it? It's all about maturing. It's all about what happens. What are you gonna do when you grow up? So physical maturity is the name of the game for the animals. And of course, for human beings, we have to make everything more complex. We have to take it to the next level. So for us, it's not just about the physical at all. Physical maturity is nice, but we also need, as human beings, we also need mental maturity, emotional maturity. Of course, we don't always make it. Some of us can be physically mature, but not emotionally mature. We definitely see examples of that. Enough said. Now there's more to talk about in this particular line, line 13. I want to share with everyone that this particular line has two variations in the ancient text. What you see here perfects them, matures them, and the characters that you see here, this actually comes from He Gong. So He Gong is an ancient sage who lived more than 2,000 years ago, and his commentary of the Daodejing and the text of the Daodejing that he used is the earliest version of the Daodejing. In that text, it uses these exact characters for line 13. So line 13 is based on the He Gong Daodejing. There's another version, and I'm going to show you what that version looks like. Even though this other version is using different characters, the meaning is actually the same. So it doesn't affect the translation. It affects the look of the Chinese characters, and they look very different. As you can see here, instead of what we have, we've got, well, you can see the them character is the same, but then we have ting, we have du. So these are quite different. And when I say they mean the same thing, someone who knows modern Chinese may look at them and say, well, no, wait a minute, they don't say the same thing. They say something very different. Let me explain. Well, first of all, let me talk about where this came from. This version comes from Wang Bi. He was the prodigy scholar who consolidated the variations of the Daodejing into a standardized version. So these characters here actually belong to the standard, what is called the received version from Wang Bi. So he doesn't go back as far back as He Gong, about 1800 years ago. And the characters are used in an ancient context, which is different from modern meaning. And that's what causes a lot of confusion. So for those who know Chinese, and I know that sometimes native Chinese speakers, people who study Chinese, look at the YouTube recording as well, I will briefly describe why the meaning is the same, even though in modern Mandarin, people who know that may not think so because they don't know ancient classical Chinese. So first of all, ting, this first character here, it means pavilion. So what's that got to do with perfecting? Well, you see the character here from He Gong Chen, it's talking about completion. Perfection in terms of completion of growth. Ting, pavilion, initially it doesn't seem like it has anything to do with that. But in ancient times, ting is also used to express the growth of someone, a woman usually, a female who's grown up, little girl all grown up, and ting ting, when you repeat the character twice, you're describing a woman who has become, a little girl who has become a statuesque woman. So we would say, what we say in English, statuesque, in Mandarin, even today, there's a set phrase, ting ting yu li, which means someone who has that, who's all grown up, perfected in terms of physical growth. So it's actually the same meaning. It's just that in ancient times, that particular meaning was much more pronounced. In modern times, because of language evolution, it's not the case anymore. In ancient times, it meant the same thing. Exactly the same is true with this character, du. It means poison. So, poison them? What do you mean? Well, no. This meaning is not used at all in modern times to say mature, but in ancient times it was the case. In ancient times, the understanding thousands of years ago was that when, for instance, a fruit becomes overripe, it will begin to rot. So the ancient Chinese will point to that and say, well, that's bad. That's bad for you. It's bad. Don't eat that. That's bad for you. That's poisonous. That's 毒. Now, it's not really poison according to modern understanding, so the character fell into disuse. But in ancient times, an adjacent meaning of 毒 was to be mature, to be ripened, which can lead to being rotten. That's why it's actually mature. So you don't need to worry about that because you don't need to study ancient Chinese. You don't need to figure out where in some cases the meaning in ancient times are different from the meaning today. But that was just a quick note to make sure that you know why there are two different versions, but they actually say the same thing. Knowledge of ancient Chinese is becoming increasingly rare. So if we don't document it in the future, it may become even more confusing for people. Some of that knowledge about ancient classical Chinese may become not known at all. Less and less well known, I should say. Let's tackle line 14. Nurtures them, protects them. So this one is easier to figure out. Nature provides the myriad of things with everything they need. And that's the first part. That's the nurture part. The first bullet there is the nurture. The second part, nature also provides shelters to protect them, from being exposed to the elements, rain, snow, wind, etc. So the two parts together form this particular line, nurtures them, protects them. What about for us human beings? Well, one thing that I can say is that we have an increasing understanding of science and the natural world. With our understanding of science, we know even more about the protection that nature has provided to us, that the Tao has furnished. And let me point out just a few examples. For instance, we have gravity. Gravity is usually taken for granted, but we know that gravity is essential as part of the environment. It certainly helps make everything more stable, more nailed down, so to speak, that things are not just floating in a random direction, as they would be if we were to live in a space station, in a microgravity environment. So we have gravity, that's important, like, sunlight, air, water, food, and so on. And then we also know that we have this atmosphere, and because we have a better understanding of science, the atmosphere protects us from the vacuum of space. Of course, we need to be able to breathe. So air is something that animals understand. We human beings will take that to the next level and talk about the layer of atmosphere surrounding the Earth that protects us and provides us with what we need. Now, that's not all. The atmosphere, we know through science, gives us additional protection. It shields us from electromagnetic radiation given off by the sun. And as you can see here, meteoroids. These are small objects flying through space. When they encounter the atmosphere, they burn up, hence shooting stars. So that protects us as well. So there's no doubt, for us, the Tao is nurturing to us, and the Tao is protecting us. So this is how we apply the same line to a human context. Now, at this point, we have an additional 4 lines to talk about. And those 4 lines are actually very important because they bear upon the mystic virtue concept, which is the last major concept from this chapter. We're almost running out of time, so we're going to have to do the discussion about mystic virtue next time. Again, with plenty of examples, illustrations, etc. For now, though, we really need to move on to the summary. And of course, we haven't done the paraphrase, we haven't done the full circle discussion. So let's go ahead and go to the summary. The summary is going to be the part 1 summary. We had a preview last time. This time, with the diagram that you saw about the 4 elements surrounding 万物, myriad things in the middle, all affecting it in some way, I think having that diagram in your mind will help you make more sense out of this. So no matter what you see, no matter what you observe in daily life, you can always apply that diagram in these questions. So and remember I said that the Tao is the source, it's the beginning, it's the starting point. It can be termed Genesis. So with everything that you observe, what is the source? That's the question. What is the Genesis? How did it begin? That's question number 1. And that covers the upper left-hand quadrant of that diagram. Question number 2, what drives it? What is the inherent force? What is the virtue? What is the force that pushed it forward? No matter what it is that you're observing, there's underlying forces that drive it. What are they? And then number 3, who are involved? So here, I'm talking about the human world. Who are the people that play a primary role of influence? Who are the players? And that corresponds to the lower left-hand corner. That's about different entities. The different entities in an environment that exert influence on what is in the middle, 万物, the myriad things. And finally, what are the factors involved? That's the lower right-hand corner. What are the internal and external forces at play? So I would urge you to look at this particular list with that diagram in mind, and then you should be able to derive insights to what you observe well beyond what most other people are able to do. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us travel safely. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.